So,
There.
I don't know if I can start this. So,
Yeah, there's a pen.
a beautiful princess was once imprisoned high in a dark tower.
Oh.
And she was there because it was prophesied that her son would destroy her father, the king. Now, the father, the king, couldn't deal with this, so he locked her away in a tower. No man will ever come near you. I'm sure we've all said that to our teenage girls as well. Well, he didn't reckon on Zeus, who came down. He loves to see women locked up in beautiful towers. And he came down to her in a golden shower of light. And 9 months later, Perseus was born, son of Zeus. Now, the king saw this because there was a baby crying up there, and it's very hard to hide those noises. And because this was the son of Zeus, he couldn't exactly kill this little child. So what do? Well, you pass the buck. I'm going to put this girl and the baby in a box, put them out to sea, and if anything happens to them, I'll blame my brother Poseidon, the god of the sea. So it was deemed that the beautiful princess was put in a box to sea with the baby and left for dead. Now, of course, Poseidon, the god of the sea, being the brother of the king of the gods, guided this nice little box to a lovely island where Perseus could grow up into a man. Now, he grew up not knowing that he was the son of a king, and he grew up without any money. And when the evil king next door decided to marry his mother, who was still quite a beautiful woman, he had nothing to offer for their wedding. He could offer only his services. And he asked the king, "What can I give for you?" The only thing the king wanted, because he was quite evil and he wanted this young man out of the way, "Bring me the head of the Medusa, a creature so fearsome and terrifying that she will turn anyone who looks at her to stone." So, an impossible task, but not when the gods are smiling at you. And fortunately, young Perseus had caught the eye of Athena, the goddess of wisdom. So Perseus set forth, and to do so he had to cross the gray, silent river Styx, which is where people go when they die. And he had to go to the other side of the mortal world to seek 3 vital tools to help him on his way. These were, number 1, the winged sandals of Hermes, which would render him flighted. Number 2, the sword of Zeus, which would cut through metal like butter. And the other, a gleaming metal shield from Athena herself, which reflected like a mirror, so he wouldn't have to gaze on the Gorgon itself. Then, of course, because he's a good man, he had to stop for directions. He had to find the 3 Gorgon sisters, 3 Stygian witches of the north in order to get the location of the Medusa. And so, having found that, he was guided through the night with his gifts to a very freaky island surrounded by stones of people looking like this, like this. These weren't statues. These were the heroes who had come before him and failed, who had gazed at the Medusa and was turned to stone. Perseus heard the sound of rattling and hissing. He raised his shield, he raised his sword. This was the moment that was his fate. He struck. Her head came off, a lovely Pegasus came out. It was a win-win. And the Medusa was slain. So Perseus climbed onto the back of the Pegasus, the winged horse, with the head of the Medusa in his bag, and he flew home victorious. It was now time to give the gift to the evil king. He arrives just in time for wedding night. He tells his mother to shield her eyes. "My king, here is the head you wanted." And in so doing, everybody turns to stone. Perseus and his mother get back on the winged horse, and they go back victorious to their island where they had come from. So, welcome to telling your story in 10 easy steps. What I do, I make very complex stories understandable and easy and downright fun for normal people. So I work for a company which is, we are asset managers, and we have very complex financial instruments like leveraged buyouts, like private debt, like insider buying, like blockchain, Bitcoin. We have to explain these to the outside world because it's our money. It's not their money. What I just did actually was not tell the story of Perseus and the Gorgons, but I told the story of continuous development. That's an agile framework. It's a way of developing software. And I did it using the hero's journey. If you look at a classic hero's journey, there are some very normal steps that every classic myth has. And we can use these when we're telling our very, very boring stories, even if they're annual reports. So when I told the stories of continuous delivery, which is basically automated testing for programmers, it's extremely technical stuff. But if you tell it in terms of a hero story, you have background information, how we got to where we are. We have a problem. We have a solution, but it's a very difficult one. But not if you have the help of people higher up who are very powerful, and they give you tools that you need to get you on your way. You have to ask directions from the pros. It's hard. You have to then at one point, having all these tools and having all this help from above, you have to then rise to the challenge and do whatever it is you're supposed to do and be successful. Then you come back to the normal world, your cubicle or your team, and you implement some kind of change. You change your life, you change the lives of the people around you, and then you go on, and you usually get some kind of added extra benefit along the way that you weren't expecting, like the Pegasus. I'm not saying you're going to get a Pegasus when you do your annual report, but you never know. So, if I had told the story of continuous delivery in a normal way, the people whose help we needed, the top code, the steering committee, whose money we desperately needed to make this happen, would have fallen asleep before the end of it. So we had to tell it in a way where they would stay awake and keep their pocketbooks open. So, how do we tell our stories? My first step when I talk about this kind of thing to people, go big, get mythic. When we go from our homes to our work every day, and then we eat our lunches in our cubicles, and then we come back home to our lives at the end of the day, we somehow inherently miss these big, big challenges, these hero stories, these mythic kinds of journeys. Okay, that's my life. I get up in the morning, I have my breakfast, I go to work, I have my lunch at my cubicle, I work really hard, and I go home. But still, I like to think of myself as some kind of hero who wakes up in the morning with a task and a job to do, and I slay the Medusa at the end of every day, and at 5:30 p.m., Medusa is slain, I go home. And maybe there's a Pegasus waiting for me as well. But I think we all crave that in our lives, even if you're a ZCPer who doesn't have any job security. We need some kind of epic thing. The love that never dies, the monster that's enormous that needs to be slain. The hero's journey is, you can see it in nearly everything we do. In even one day of work, or one small thing that we're presenting, we start with something that calls us into change. And this is very true of coach. I don't know if there are a lot of coaches here tonight. There's always a moment in somebody's life when you're called to change, whether you're booted out by some other company and you have no job anymore, or whether you decide on your own it's time to move. There's always a change, a calling coming out from somewhere. That call to adventure. You depart the mortal world. Maybe you leave your job. Maybe you decide to start your own business. Maybe you get a divorce and try a new life. You're called to move out of your comfort level and into this kind of other world that seems rather scary. You get special assistance on your way. You go into a journey. You get through trials and tribulations. You have a hard time. You meet some kind of crisis. You rise. You slay. You return home victorious. And that very, very simple cycle, which is endless and repeatable, is found in nearly everything we do, no matter how small it is. If you remind people of this, people will listen. So, having said that, every time you have somebody who's a protagonist in your story, this can be a hero. Every time there's an impediment that needs to be overcome, this is a monster. Any tool that you have, even if it's a new software package, is your magical sword. Step 2. This might seem a little counterintuitive given the last bit of slides, but go small. As interesting as going big is, going small is also really very interesting. Tell a human story. For instance, recently I was explaining microfinance to somebody because the investment partners wanted to start a new branch. And how many of you know what microfinance is, more or less? How many of you people hear a term like this and they're like, oh my God, it's something financial? No, don't understand it. Right, that was me. Okay, yeah, don't be shy. What is microfinance? Don't give me a spreadsheet about billions of euros and charts and how many this many companies are doing this and this is the future of this and this and this. Here's microfinance. There's a guy called Mustafa. He lives far away. He needs 20 euro to buy a sewing machine. If he has this sewing machine, he can start a business. If we invest these tiny little amounts of money, he can buy a sewing machine. He starts his business. He pays you back. That's it. That's all it is. It's microfinance. A very tiny, tiny story. Yes, of course, we've managed to mess up that story by exploding it into pie charts and huge graphs. But really, the essence of microfinance is Mustafa and his sewing machine. Same thing with derivatives. Who knows what a derivative is? Okay, very good. I also didn't know it was a derivative. I don't understand it. No way. No way. You can easily understand it. A derivative derives its value from something bigger than itself. So it's about Helena, who had an idea about oil and the price of it in the future. She invested some money into it, and the value of it is derived from the price of oil, but it's not actually oil that she's buying and selling. She's buying an idea in the future. So it's just one person, one hunch, one very, very small idea. All right, step 3. Now this is my favorite one, because this is the one that I keep repeating all the time. I like to say death to bullet points. The text is you. We're all multitaskers, right? Here's the thing. There's no such thing as multitasking. None of us can actually multitask. All we can do, even though we're really, really good at it and really fast at it, is switch very quickly between reading and listening. If you're listening, you're not reading. If you're reading, you're not listening. The speaker is the text. The thing that's happening behind you is supporting your story. So, if people are reading a huge amount of text behind you, like this, they're not going to be listening. And especially if it's this, because, right? So this was the story of a training program that somebody wanted to implement within the Tech and Ops department. And they wanted to do it in 3 tracks. So what you do is you split it out. And I don't care if you split out one slide into 500, as long as you split it out in a normal way. So this is that one slide. It was split out over several different stories. It's a 3-track approach. Here's track 1, here's track 2, here's track 3. Almost no text at all. And the rest he was able to explain because he knew his story. He was just talking the way he would talk over lunch. And that made the story understandable for all of us non-techies. All right, step 4. Now this is really, really hard. Make it short. People will only really remember about 20% of what you're talking about. If there's wine involved, it'll probably be closer to 10%. So be lucky if they can even remember anything at all. I know if you're really passionate about something, you want to tell everything. You want to tell your entire story and your background and how you got here and what you're going to do later and all this stuff. But if you can possibly take what you've done, your story, cut it in half, even if it hurts, and that you'll have a chance, 20% of which will be remembered, and 10% of that if there's one involved. So when in doubt, cut it in half. Right alongside that is death to acronyms. Don't assume that people know what you're talking about. These are all acronyms that I gathered from wonderful internet that we should all know, because we're all really hip and we all use our devices and we all are SMSing everywhere. But even I don't know half of these. I don't even know, okay, so I'm not that hip, but I don't even know 5% of these. So don't use acronyms. Spell it out and then just forget about it. People will not necessarily know it.
You may need that slide at the end of the
Sure, yeah, I can send that to you. I love that one. Yeah, I'm learning a lot. Once you have your story more or less together, try telling it to your kids. If you don't have any of your own, borrow your neighbor. She'll be thrilled. She can go out for a tea. And if you can tell your story to a bunch of 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and they have a bit of an understanding of what you're talking about, then you're right. Even if you're talking to people who should know better, even if you're talking about the CEO of whatever, and if you're presenting to some board of whatever, if you can make your kids interested in what you're talking about, or your neighbor's kids interested, then you've got something. Then you've got something that people will actually understand and listen to. Step 5, try to go visual whenever possible. And this is where I like to come in. A picture is worth 1,000 words, we know that, but an emoji is worth about 10,000 words. We are not even using text in our communication anymore when we're talking on our phones. We go from text straight to visual. So I once had an entire conversation with a girlfriend of mine, I think last week, where we used only visuals to explain when are we meeting for dinner, what are we gonna eat, what time we're having, and will there be wine involved? And that we did almost entirely visually. So I had this kind of moment of light bulb going off where, hey, text is going out, visuals are coming in. We are converting as a species from one form of communication to another. And a picture, by the way, 30% of our brain is used just for visual processing, and only 10% of our brain is used for auditory processing, and even less is used for reading processing. So that gives you an idea of how many sensors there are ready for pictures. If you can use a picture to communicate a word or even a sentence, you can reach your audience that much quicker. And your audience, by the way, will remember it much clearer, because our memory is set up to remember pictures. Our memory is not set up to remember words, and it's definitely not set up to remember just plain old speeches. So if there's any time that you can substitute pictures for words in your presentations, do it. There's great sources for these kinds of icons. All you have to do is go to the fabulous Google machine, type in your concept, click in icon, and you'll get whatever you need. Now, let's say you can't find what you're looking for. Well, draw it yourself, right? Get out your pen, and you're gonna say, oh my God, I can't draw. I'm telling you that you can draw. Can you draw one of these shapes? If you're able to draw one of these shapes, then you can draw, because you put these shapes together and you can form other things. It doesn't have to be good. We're talking about delivering a message. It doesn't have to be amazing or awesome. You just have to get a concept together, put certain shapes together, and you've communicated your idea. So don't be shy to make your own visuals or hire somebody's kids. Number 6, use metaphors. Metaphors are what human beings do to understand things. When we see something we don't understand out there, we say, ah, that looks a little bit like that thing that I do know. Ah, I understand it, right? We do this automatically. So help your audience in their natural process when they're trying to understand what you're saying. Help them along by using some metaphors. And by the way, we also use this in our own lives when we're trying to remember a name, when we're trying to remember a very simple process. We automatically start doing this in our own minds. If we're trying to explain cloud-based computing, we can do it that way. Or we can do it this way. How do I explain what's the cloud to people who are non-technical? Okay, you have a local computer, and you have stuff that's on your computer, and you take the stuff off of your computer to use it. What's cloud-based computing? Think of cotton candy in the sky. You grab it when you need it, you eat it, you consume it, you don't have anything there locally to work with. When you need more cotton candy, you grab some more. There's an endless source of it. You don't have it locally on your machine, you grab it from another source. So I've just told the story of what cloud-based computing is using cotton candy, okay? So, this can be done with almost everything we use, by the way. Almost any complex process or product that we have can be told with a metaphor. All right, number 7. This is also a very difficult one, but it's very, very important. one slide, one idea. One slide, one idea. Can't say this often enough. Here's a slide. I got this about 2 weeks ago from somebody who had a story to tell. It's like, it's really important that we get all this information across. Okay. What are you trying to say here? She didn't even know. So, well, I think it has something to do with, oh yeah, well, we don't hire enough women in this corporate environment. Okay, so that's telling me that you don't have women. So basically what she said was, these are the reasons that we thought that men thought that women were not competent, but really it has more to do with this stuff, that there's inadequate pipelines. But this is also in here too, but this is a high amount of effort, this is a low amount of effort, and this is fixing women and that's fixing, or maybe it's the other way around. Anyway, she couldn't even explain to me what she was talking about. So what we decided to do, she had this great idea of splitting out the slides into very small nuggets of information. So the first thing that she wanted to express was that what are the real reasons why women aren't in these management roles? Is it because they're incompetent, or is it because there wasn't enough support for them from management? And if we were to graph this out into one simple idea, why is it we fail? Are we failing to hire women? Is it because the women are incompetent, or is it because the leadership isn't taking this on? And what we came up with was one very, very simple bar graph that explained it had nothing to do with the fact that there were not competent women out there. It had a lot to do with the pipelines that were laid to bring these women into management. And if we can express this idea in a very simple visual, one idea, one slide, then it comes across in a much clearer way. She was trying to tell too many stories. Let me go back one. All of this information was important, right? She wanted to express that there's a lot of effort in some things, low effort in others. She wanted to express that some things had to do with the individual and some things had to do with the company at large. She wanted to express that there was a gradation in actual numbers as we go up and down the scale. There were a lot of interesting things that she wanted to tell here, but she wanted to explain them all in one slide, right? I took about 10 slides to tell this one story, and that made it a lot clearer to the people that she was talking to. Okay. Step 8. Make it about you. Make it personal. Share a couple of details about yourself, even if it's irrelevant, that you think. It makes people interested, because we're all interested in people's stories. I want to know why you're doing what you're doing. Why should I care? Why are you expressing your opinion? Share a detail or two about your own life, some little anecdote. Because if it's not important to you, then it certainly won't be important to me either. Basically, the reason why we need to do this is because if your audience doesn't see themselves in your story, and I guess that's said a little bit sad thing about human beings as a whole, we need to always see ourselves in our outside world. I think Anais Nin said, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And if we don't see ourselves in the things that are being told to us, we can't be in there with that story. Almost there. So, this I think everybody knows. The best stories are those that make us better, that teach us something, that communicate something, that make us better, make us change something about the way we think about something, about who we are, about what we want to do. It's not about being sold something. We have this receptor in our own minds, oh, somebody's trying to sell me something. And we immediately switch off if we feel like we're being sold to. However, if you're helping somebody to understand something better, to raise awareness, to change a certain behavior, people will be a lot more open to hearing that. Because again, they're seeing themselves in your talk. They're being educated. There's something in this for me. I'm not just here to meet a quota from somebody and buy something. The time I bought most wine recently was when I was educated. a guy came around offering a full wine tasting, and I learned about what's the difference between a grape and a vintage, and what's the color and the legs. Does anybody know that wine has legs? It does. You swirl it. The thing is, there's a legs. It's like, I don't know legs. Okay. How do you smell wine? Wow, I really learned something. I bought like a case of wine from the guy, right? So he educated me. He didn't sell me wine at all. He was just there to educate me, and I wound up buying. Now, that worked really great with wine, but it'll work with anything you do. And lastly, and this is actually the most important thing, is love. We love what we do. We all chose to be doing what we're doing. There's a reason why we're not hairdressers or yoga instructors, or we are yoga instructors, or we are hairdressers. We all chose it. Even if you think you didn't, you did choose to do what you do. And if you don't love what you do, nobody's going to listen. So that's all I have to say on that subject. Yeah. I'll just, one last thing is, not everybody has access to resources like animation, but animation is a very effective way of telling a story. I'll just briefly show you what I do in general. This is a piece about gender diversity to help explain stories. Now, of course, asset managers have a lot more budget than you and me, so the chances of being able to create an animation like this on a single person's budget is low. But having said that, there's a word for this kind of technique. It's called an explainer. And we're seeing this more and more on the web. If we're trying to understand something like a certain software that we're buying, or even how to use Spotify. I got Spotify. It didn't make any sense to me at all. I didn't understand a thing of what it was. But then when I saw the Spotify animation, it became clear. So animation is a really, really great tool. And maybe you work for a company that has a bit of budget. It's a wonderful way to start a presentation because it gets everybody at a very equal level. We all have an understanding, a basic understanding of what the topic is that you're talking about. And from there you can soar onwards and tell your story, knowing that all the people down below have a basic understanding of what it is you're doing. So this particular story has to do with, again, why there aren't any women in asset management. Strange, but true. And this was basically meant to explain to men why they were failing and what they can do about it. And so we explore mind bugs, which is this way of sort of erroneous way of thinking, and so they say they're going to change. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. I'm going to just skip through this because I know we're a bit short on time. So anyway, just to recap real quick. Number 1, go big. Number 2, go small. Number 3, the text is you. Number 4, shorten, have. Number 5, go visual. Number 6, use metaphors. Number 7, one idea, one slide. One idea, one slide. One idea. Get personal. Educate. Love. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Teresa?
Hi.